The crew in Kenya who were keeping an eye on an elephant when she gave birth were so shocked that they let out a scream. A brief moment of jubilation, however, swiftly devolved into a race against the clock. It had been years of restlessness in Peru. She was an elephant reaching her senior year, getting close to 40, and her window for having another kid was closing. For years, Peru had been trying for a second child, but she already had a daughter who was a few years old. A group of conservationists under the leadership of an elderly environmentalist named Kenneth Ole Nashu were observing her from a distance. They looked after the Amboseli National Park, which was close to Tanzania's border and was specifically designed to protect the local elephant population. As they monitored the region, Kenneth and his staff dealt with the authorities, repelled would-be poachers, and even gave tours to tourists who wanted to see the amazing creatures up close. Despite their best efforts, they were unable to compel the pregnancy. Although there were 40 elephants in the herd, their prospects of surviving would be significantly increased if Peru could give birth only one more. Kenneth was ecstatic when he received the news at headquarters that Peru was finally pregnant. The idea of a new member entering the elephant family thrilled the staff. But first, Peru had to overcome the pregnancy, which was no small feat. She would not give birth for nearly 22 months. The resident veterinarians wanted to conduct medical checks on Peru, but they were unable to do so since the Amboseli National Park was not a zoo. As an alternative, they observed her conduct from a distance, recording anything unusual. Even with her firstborn daughter, Peru was starting to show signs of withdrawal. There was nothing particularly unusual about this. Signs of blood were particularly concerning. Rangers were worried about a miscarriage since they had recorded a large quantity of blood loss over a number of days. This may pose a major risk to Peru's health given her advanced age. She was being closely watched by the environmentalists. Kenneth saw a bunch of distressed elephants one morning from a distance. At the base of a big marula tree, they were stomping their feet. He sensed right away that something wasn't right. Eager to find out what was going on, Kenneth drove his Jeep toward the chaos as the sky grew darker and visibility was poor. The elephants looked at him as his lights flickered across the tree trunk. Peru was lying down behind them, panting. Her head cocked to one side and one leg lay on the other. She seemed sleepy and perplexed. Fearful of the herd, Kenneth waited in his car and called backup to give Peru a thorough examination. It was plausible that the others may become hostile if Peru suffered harm. They could be protective of her because she was a senior and held a lot of respect. It was already dark when the team of veterinarians arrived. An ocean of stars stretched as far as the eye could reach, and the air was filled with the gentle buzzing of insects. Peru was being examined down below, behind this lone marula tree. The elephant's enormous body dwarfed the young veterinarian's palm as he ran it down Peru's thick, rough skin. She seemed to be breathing regularly, and he could feel her heart pumping. The remainder of the herd gathered in a semicircle around them, waiting impatiently for the humans to finish their tasks. They knew the vets by face and trusted them. However, Peru's leg shook violently when the veterinarian extracted some blood. There was a flurry of activity as each elephant fought for a better vantage point. Peru's first daughter was in the front of the throng, unsure what was happening. For hours, they had all realized that something was seriously off. The veterinarian returned the samples to the vehicle for analysis, moving gently. Initially, they wanted to confirm that she was getting adequate nutrition and that her levels were appropriate. More crucially, though, they had to check her health and how her body was responding to the pregnancy. Peru had a potential blood clot somewhere in her body and was severely dehydrated. They gave her medication by hooking her up to an IV drip. As the veterinarians worked diligently under Kenneth's guidance, who was still slapping insects away from his face, a floodlight had been set up to illuminate the area. He stabilized Peru with the squad, and he began to roam about once more. Although there was no indication of any fatal illnesses, Kenneth was still worried because they did not yet know what was causing her illness. He camped out in his Jeep that night, sleeping for short periods of time whenever he could, since he didn't want to leave Peru alone. He would start his automobile and start up whenever he noticed the elephants moving, following their path wherever it led. Kenneth carried on doing this throughout the course of the following week, switching places with his colleagues to monitor Peru. Aziz, a young, aspiring veterinarian still in training, accompanied them when necessary. Although he was anxious and felt completely out of his element, he was one of the few other team members who was prepared to put in extra time. He was going to take on a significant responsibility, and he wanted to make a difference. Soon, the moment had come. Peru was going to give birth. That night, while on duty, Kenneth fell asleep in his automobile with Aziz seated next to him. Since the elephants typically gave birth at night, Aziz had discovered that it was crucial to keep an eye on them during that time. The car's headlights were the only source of light in the region. Through the binoculars, Aziz was alert enough to see Peru standing up, looking agitated. "The moment has come," he informed his employer, shaking Kenneth's arm. Kenneth yawned and rubbed his eyes before removing the binoculars. "Good catch," he said to his youthful companion. They were now hopeful that everything would happen without a hitch. Suddenly, the head and legs of an elephant emerged from Peru. It was amazing. It was finished in less than 30 minutes, and Aziz had never witnessed a live delivery before. He was going to receive something even more unique, though. Another head started to appear as Kenneth was radioing the good news to base camp. He yelled as his jaw fell open in disbelief. Twins were being born in Peru. Given how risky twin pregnancies are for elephants, everything suddenly made sense, particularly her illness. Aziz was informed by Kenneth that he had never witnessed a twin delivery in his decades of experience in the field. Nearly 40 years have passed since the last elephant twin birth in Amboseli National Park. Kenneth, a devout guy, felt as though he had just witnessed a miracle as he gazed up into the sky. The repopulation initiatives were going to benefit greatly from this. However, it wasn't that easy. Early in the morning, sunshine was beginning to filter through the clouds. When Aziz saw something while looking through the binoculars, he questioned his supervisor if the elephant calf's bleeding was typical. Kenneth could see now that Aziz was correct. There was a good deal of blood on the back of one of the calves. It had somehow cut itself during or shortly after the birth. The following few hours would be crucial, and this was not encouraging. Kenneth had to get everyone up at the crack of dawn by calling them at home in a hurry to get the veterinary team back together. Fortunately, though, they all wanted to make sure the calf was okay, so none of them turned down the call. Knowing that they were looking out for her best interests, Peru kindly allowed them to examine her infants when they returned with the same equipment. The veterinarians were unable to explain the wound. They had to keep an eye on it, clean it, and make sure it wasn't infected. The young, bright-eyed Aziz, who had detected something even Kenneth would have missed, was responsible for the tiny elephant's eventual full recovery. With Kenneth as his mentor, Aziz was inspired to inspire a new generation to carry on conservation work in India. The twin birth quickly became national news, which energized conservation efforts and gave them much-needed attention. Later, these young calves helped prevent the extinction of Indian elephants. They were accompanied by Kenneth and Aziz, who were prepared to do all within their ability to support the cause. What an unexpected turn! Did you realize that twins might also be born to elephants? If you had been Kenneth and Aziz, how would you have responded? Tell us in the space provided below.